What? What? Hey, welcome to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. I just happened to sing through my intro. Uh, welcome to Talk of the Town on a blustery but beautiful spring afternoon. So, guys, it's been a great week. I actually got out to go golfing. You know, it's funny because we always have these things that we look forward to in the spring. You know, the winter's all done. I'm glad that it rained because it washes away the residue of winter. And, it seems like the weather's starting to calm down a little bit. Well, not the wind, but the wind never calms down. But it seems like we just might be done with old man winter for the year. So it's interesting. This week I spent a little time doing the classic spring honeydew list. The garage is all cleaned out. This week I got to readjust my closet so all the spring and summer stuff comes out. And I knocked off the golf clubs. I got them all cleaned up, and I headed out to the Mape. As you guys know, I like to golf out at Maple River Golf Club. Shout out to the crew over there. I went out, and to my delight, I shot up a salty 41 James. I was on fire. My new swing, I don't know if you guys know this, but I golf like Tiger Woods. Every year I have to retool my swing. I haven't had his success, but, I figure one day I'll put it all together. But it was a great weekend. And so, last week when I talked, I was going to get around to the whole no cell phones in school debate, and we had lively discussion about everything, but I just want to review that briefly. Now, it's interesting that this thing is going to happen, but upon further review, the question is, what does the implementation look like? Who's going to be responsible? What are going to be the consequences for people that don't follow what the law is on the books? And it's funny because we're talking about it over at Davies because it's pretty interesting. We all agree that, I think cell phones are great. I mean, it's fantastic. You have everything that you need right at your fingertips. But as I like to say, we send our kids to school for one reason, and it's something that I held true, and that is to get an education. And I've always said I don't really care about the extracurricular activities because really just give them the core classes and then turn them loose. But, part of the reason we keep kids in classes because it coincides with the 8-hour work day. But, to me, I think it's something where we have to get things back in line. And in the face of everything that's happening today in our society, it seems like we're going through a reset. It seems like we have decided enough is enough. And the powers that are in charge right now are saying, hey, look, we want better. We want to have some hard standards. And I think no cell phones are in the school in classes are great. I also found out that this extends to teachers and administrators. And so now that's really got me thinking, okay, are the adults going to be on board with that? And the teachers that I've talked to are like, yeah, I would love the whole thing. But it is something that I'm in favor of. I want to see, though, how it's going to be implemented. Is it going to cost more to do this? There are a lot of laws and stuff that are enacted, but are never really followed through with because the implementation doesn't work. We actually see that with this whole thing going on in El Salvador. The Supreme Court has made a ruling, but somehow we can't seem to get this guy back. We can get him back, but we can't get this other guy back. I forget his name. Anyway, so I want to hear what you guys have to say about that, and as well as how are cell phones affecting you if you have kids or even with your spouses. Then the next thing I wanted to talk about, go to events. And at Davies, they have about 200 kids out for track. And I was out watching, I was just thinking, what a beautiful day. And I want people to call it, what are you looking forward to this spring? What are you looking forward to do? I mean, I've got some friends that they've already started heading to the lakes, and I guess heading to the lakes and getting that all squared away, it can be as daunting as doing the spring cleaning. Geraldine and I, we cannot wait for the cleanup day, James. When you throw your stuff out on the curb,
That is one of the greatest things that this metro does for us.
right?
It really is.
It is. And
In college, you find treasure that people think is junk, and once you're out of college, you get rid of junk without the price.
I was talking to a friend, and he said that when he wants to get rid of stuff, he'll put it on the curb with a for sale sign on it, and within a couple days, it's gone. But the cleanup day, I'm telling you, man, it's a great way to reset, and we look forward to that. And then you got to get your yard work done and all of that. But basically, I can't wait. I'm pretty excited. I just hope that the weather breaks the right way. Now, I also hope that we get some rain, because it didn't rain a whole lot. James, you remember it being a lot of things happen on social media, and I think, we have to pay attention to that. And certainly there's no place for the cell phone in school as far as that goes. We've seen all over the place how these things have happened. So that's going to be what we're going to talk about. But at the top of the list, so have you seen, James, that on TikTok, in response to Trump's tariff now, there are Chinese companies that are offering factory direct shipping of things like Nike shoes. Now, when I talk about it, I'm not going to talk about like the Louis Vuitton knockoffs. I'm not going to talk about the Ray-Ban sunglasses or the fake Oakleys and all that. But Nikes are made in China, Vietnam, and Thailand, right?
Yep.
So my question is, and I looked for it, I couldn't really get a good answer of, if you buy the Nikes for $30, everything said is done, you got shipping, you got to pay the tariffs. Are they still going to cost as much as they would if you were to buy them in the store? You know anything about that?
I don't, but I would be curious to see what, the standard price if you were to go to your local, designer shoe warehouse or Shields or
Right.
whichever, and you spend, give or take $100 to $150 on a pair of shoes.
Right.
With that, because I from the tariff, the little bit that I've seen, it seems as though China's playing the most hardball, and they want to basically do double, everything kind of like what the U.S. wanted to do. So
Right.
I would be curious to see, does that make a pair of shoes that cost them $30? Is that $60 for the consumer?
Yeah, see, that's
the uncertainties.
That's the question. It's like, okay, so let's say it's 100% tariff. That would be a $60 shoe still. And then if it costs you another $20 for shipping, and it's those Jordans are typically what, 150 or whatever. Talk about is, now that you see that you may have options to go factory direct, are you someone that's saying, hey, this looks like a good deal? Are you going to go for it? Or are you thinking, well, nah, I'm going to believe that I need to support our people? So when we come back, we're going to talk more about the tariffs as well as the ability to buy Chinese direct. Hey, welcome back to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. I, I'm talking about TikTok and some other platforms. They now are offering these sites that you can buy goods that you need from China direct. And so the question is that something that you would be taking advantage of? Now, remember that right now, I believe that is law, but that is going to go away. I think it's May 4th or May 5th or something like that. The first question is is this really capitalism and free trade? If you're taking away something that a lot of people take advantage of. There's websites, you have Amazon that offers low cost goods. You have Temu and I think it's Sheen or Shine. Have you heard of those, James? Have you ever used Temu?
I've heard of them. I've never used them.
So I bought some stuff from Temu. Now you got to understand there's some things like I bought a rangefinder from them and dude, it came. It's fantastic. It was dirt cheap, but I think there's a need for stuff like that because despite being able to buy what I want, I am cheap. Okay, I'll be the first one to say it. So if I can buy a garden hose, for $3 from Temu, I'm going to take it because after all, it's a garden hose. I wouldn't trust any tools that come from overseas, but you get the point. There are things that we buy every day that instead of going to Walmart or Target, I'm going to buy it online. You can also find these cheaper goods. If you ever do a search on Amazon, what you'll find is that you'll find the product you're looking for, but you'll also find like products that aren't exactly the same brand, but they basically do the same thing and they're like dollars cheaper, I mean, anywhere from 10 to 30% cheaper. So the question becomes, now that we have this avenue where they're really the Chinese are opening up this market, is that something that you're looking to take advantage of? And for me, I think, a reputable site like, what I deem reputable, like Amazon, I'm less likely to worry about my information as it goes, like my debit card that I use or my credit card that I use. It's like, every time you use that, that's going to somebody that you've never met, right? It's going to a business that you don't necessarily know what's happening with that information. But me, I'm like, what? Hiding, my wife is funny. She hates to even text me information. Like if I said, hey, send me your social security number. I got to do something for insurance. She would call me on the phone before she ever texts me that information. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you just text me? Well, you never know who could get a hold to it. And in my way of thinking, they already have it. This is a global economy. It's a global world now. And so, when you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, why wouldn't I want to take advantage of low price goods? And on some level, I think the parallels are, for us that are working every day and struggling, this is where we save money, right? This is how we keep more dollars in our pockets. We take advantage of these things. The wealthy, they take advantage of loopholes in the tax codes, which, hey, you know what? If it's written in its law, hey, good on them. I can't argue with it. I just wish I was smart enough, or I guess I have to have enough money to be smart enough to be able to take advantage of those. But somehow I think if I'm buying factory direct from China, that's where my savings come. But now that's going away. And so with it going away, that only hurts who? It hurts the American consumer. Because if you're one of those people like me that's looking for the best deal, if it's factory direct for China, I'm going to take that. Because then I can keep more money in my pocket to do other things. But at the same time, I'm just going to do the buyer beware thing, is that if you are going to buy, you most certainly want to figure out what are the most reputable sites. You really got to do your homework because let's face it, um, it's not like China's in the Stone Ages. They have the ability to do the same things that we do, and in some instances, they do it better. And so you get onto the wrong website, they may have access to your computer and your information. I once had something happen where um, I was on a website and it flashed blue and it looked just like a Microsoft website. And I have pretty good security on my computer. And it just said your computer has been infected with malware, the whole thing. And it looked like it was my McAfee telling me that. And so my friend Mike Adashi and I called him. I said, hey, man, I'm getting this notice that I need to call this number so that they can reset my computer or something. And he was like, whatever you do, don't click any buttons. Don't call that phone number. It's a scam. Now, at the time, I wasn't very computer savvy, but I also had Mike to tell me, hey, look, man, you don't want to do that. But how many people out here actually called that number and then ended up having their identity stolen or something else happened to them? These are the things that we have to think about as we have these opportunities pop up. Now me, I'm like, hey, I think, number one, I don't wear Jordans, but I can tell you what, if they're offering FootJoy patent leather sole uppers for golf, oh yeah, I think I'll be taking advantage of that. If I can get some Callaway golf clubs for $500 less than I'm getting them now, probably going to take advantage of that. So, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say on the matter, but this is all a part of what's going down now. And it's interesting the way that China has fought back against these tariffs. It's almost like they've said, you know what, let's talk to the American people. Let's get the American people on our side. And you know me, I'm laughing about it because it's like here, for the long time, China has been the big bad enemy, right? We can't trust Chinese goods. Of course, their human rights atrocities against their people and their sweatshops and all of this. But now China's coming out and saying to the American people through these platforms, hey, we're going to help you out. This is what we're going to do for you. And I just have to laugh a little bit because in my head, do you really think that the Chinese people are looking at the United States and saying, hey, what can we do to help the American people? This is the same country that had a bond sell-off last week. I don't know if you guys know that, but they hold a lot. We're in debt to China for a great deal, and there was a bond sell-off. Look it up. That's scary because if they sell enough of that, it weakens our position in the world. Now, on the one hand, I'm here talking about the TikTok thing, and hey, would you be willing to buy Chinese goods factory direct because they're cheaper, and not support United States business, which, by the way, we're going to get to that because there's a whole bunch of information about when we bring back manufacturing, how are we going to keep the cost down? How are we going to be able to build stuff? And so it's like, okay, if we continue along this path and we do build our infrastructure, like I was talking to my son and he was talking to me about NVIDIA and how they're going to start making chips, and for the first time in a long time, we're going to start building computers in America. And he couldn't answer this, but my question was, so how much is that computer going to cost? Big Game James says we're up against the break. When I come back, we're going to talk more about the tariffs. If you want to call in, we could talk about the tariffs. We could talk about, are you going to buy from China? As well as I want to hear your thoughts on cell phones in the public schools. Hey, welcome back to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. I've been talking about the tariffs and the possibility that you can buy factory direct from China and save yourself a bunch of dough. But as you know from previous conversation on the show, that program is ending. You know, you can buy anything under $800 and won't be subject to tariffs. But you know, I said it before. I think there's some things. I think there's some merit to it. You know, growing up. Yeah, I grew up poor. We didn't have a whole lot of money, so we shopped at discount places and, you know, wherever we could get the lowest price. And I can tell you that I didn't have any name brand clothes really till I was about a junior in high school. And, you know, I started working this summer program as a government program called CETA. And it was eligible, you were eligible if you were in the city. And you got to work as a high schooler for the summer. And, like I said in previous shows, half went to the house and my parents, the other half I got to keep. And I can remember buying my first pair of Adidas. And actually, no, the first pair of shoes that I ever owned that were my own, well, they were ponies. I don't know if you're old enough, James, to know what ponies are, but they were the hot football spike. They were the all-over spike. And then they were turf shoes. It was just when turf shoes, the Metrodome had come into existence, so turf was just coming in, and it was the rage. But pony were the shoes that I bought. So anyway, I was talking about, you know, it's great that we have this avenue of citizens to purchase things factory direct from China, but the question becomes, can we trust what we're getting? Can we trust the people that we're sending our information to? And basically what's happening is the Chinese have said, you know what? We're going to cut out the middleman and we're going to go straight to the source, offering, you know, if you go on TikTok and Facebook, you can see it's all over those spaces, and they're saying, hey, listen, we want to help. We don't want the American people to be affected by this tariff, this trade war that we have going on. It sent, and I will talk about luxury items, it sent Prada, Gucci, Michael Kors, Birkin. All of these luxury manufacturers were sent scrambling when it came out that these purses and things, and most purses, according to the Chinese, weren't, they were very cheap. So they'd produce them for $30, and these companies are selling them for $3,000 and $4,000. And so it's like, I'm going to tell you, I bought some knockoff stuff, and it's funny because some of my friends couldn't tell when they actually bought the real thing, and we did a comparison, and you really couldn't tell the difference. And I thought, man, I made out like a bandit. I didn't have to pay that much, but you know, this is the world that we live in. You know, it's a global world, and I just, when I'm looking at things, is anybody out there concerned about our isolationism that's happening through our federal government? You know, we can't exist in a vacuum. Well, the question is, let's say that manufacturing comes back. What does that look like? And, you know, I have friends that are Trump fans, and I ask them all the time. I even talked to my son Jackson. I was like, well, do you think that we're going to be able to produce goods that someone who's barely making a living wage can afford? And we've heard that, you know, if they start producing iPhones in America, they're going to cost $3,000. It's going to be double or whatever that. But what I want to know is, how do we know that the prices are going to go down? It's kind of like the trickle-down theory. You know, since the Reagan era, I have been told that if we give tax breaks to the wealthy, it's going to trickle down to the everyday person. That if we give businesses tax break, it's going to trickle down to the everyday person. During COVID, when there was money everywhere, and these companies were selling everything, and we had supply chain issues, and the demand was up, I didn't see any prices go down. I didn't see things become more affordable. As a matter of fact, when it ended, I didn't see the prices go back to where they should be. You know, that we were told that's what's supposed to happen, but that didn't happen. So in the wake of everything that's going on in our society today, how do we trust the future? And God bless them. I'm going to tell you, these MAGA fans and these Trump fans, to a person, they are diehard convinced that things are going to be better. And I admire their faith and their stick-to-itness, but I want to ask the question, what if it doesn't work out? What happens if our economy continues the way it's going? You know, we right now, the stock market, we see ups and downs based on, depending on what the president says, right? Hey, it's a good time to buy. Next thing you know, boom, there's a little bit of blip, people make money. I'm not going to lie, I bought stocks when they were down. I bought some NVIDIA stock when it went to 89. You know, I figured, you know what, why not get in when it's low? But what if we don't recover? You know, we're close. If not in a recession, we've got to be close. You know, I don't know what inflation is at, but I don't necessarily just blindly say, let's sit back. And I'm not going to lie, I did say in January, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to wait and see. I think we owe that much. Well, it's not that we owe. I feel like what other choice do I have? You know, I can't continue to get upset about this. I mean, it drives me crazy. I'm 60 years old. I don't want to have a heart attack. I wonder what my medical bills will be, even though I have good insurance. But that's the point. At what point do we say, okay, show us something? You know, let's see the long-term results of what we're doing. Let's see the long-term effects that this is going to have on the everyday person. You know, because contrary to popular belief, the wealthy, or the oligarchs, I guess we call them, they may run the country, but there are millions of people, okay, that are affected by these decisions. And the question is, what happens if it all starts really going south? Now, some would say it's already going south, and we've seen protests and stuff like that. But what is the real recourse that we have as Americans? That should be of great concern to each and every one of us, because the bottom line is our 401k is taking a beating. And I hear people saying, yeah, but we're going to recover. You know, what if we don't? I can tell you, and I keep saying, I'm going to say it every week, I'm not retired in 3 years. That was the program. Not going to happen. Okay? That's the economic impact, right? But also the social impact. China stopped buying beef. I don't know if they stopped buying soybeans, but what happened? What are we doing to subsidize these farmers, which is going to have to happen? We can't not have food. One more thing, and to me that's a big one, is right now I think it was 15% China's imports of American goods, or the trade is 15% of their GDP, which means that if we're not doing business with them, they got to make up that 15% somewhere. And I was scouring on the different websites and different news outlets, and China has cozied up to Australia, some countries in Europe, as well as the African nations. They're looking for another place to grow their economy other than the United States. So the number is 15%. If they're able to replace the 15% that they are now doing business with us from the United States, if they're able to replace that, how do we pivot? That's a very real question. How do we pivot then? Where do we make that up? Now, my contention is I think cooler heads are going to prevail, because right now nobody's blinking in the White House. The Chinese are remaining hardline on what they want to do. So my hope is that there's enough pressure from both sides that this thing is settled, or negotiations happen soon. But it sounds like China is not even taking the president's phone calls, which, how do you know? I can only go by the news reports. But, this is scary stuff. And I don't mean, listen, I don't want to be out here fear-mongering and saying, hey, all gloom and doom. But as American citizens, we better wake up and pay attention. We better pay attention to what our government officials are doing. And we better work on providing some answers as a populace as a whole. James says, Big Game James says, we're up against a break. When I come back, I'll wrap it up. We're going to talk more about the tariffs. We're going to talk more about the cell phones. Call in. If you have a thought on either, this is Jon Adams with Talk of the Count. If you want to call in, phone number 701-293-9000. Sports world, people have success. They move on. They move up. Congratulations to Coach Tim Bergstrasser over at Morehead State University. He took the job a step way up as far as I'm concerned. He's going to be the head coach at Denver. Is it Denver University or Denver, Colorado? Denver College. Either way.
It's the University of Denver.
Sorry.
They call it DU, though. The Pioneers in the Summit League.
So he's in the Summit League, which means that he'll get to see the Bison, won't he?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that'll be a guy from Indiana. When he was at James Madison, he took a bevy of players down to Indiana University with him, and they made the national playoffs, I believe. Well, the same thing is happening at Morehead State now. This guy's taking what, top 5 freshmen, incoming freshmen or whatever? Is that what it is?
He's taken 5 players with him, 3 of which were from the freshman class last year. 2 were starting, Sean Wysocki and also Carson Johnson, who was the tournament MVP of the NSIC tournament. And then Cody Dandridge, who was he's a big frame guard, a 6'5 guard, who is redshirted last year. That's the 3rd one. Those all 3 of them were freshmen last year. Cody will be a redshirt freshman this year. The other 2 will be sophomores. Logan Kinsey, one of the twins from the roster. He is a senior this year. He was an all-conference first-teamer last year for the Dragons. one of those guys that does the dirty work, and he does it with pride. He doesn't care about the accolades. And then the fifth one is Jameer Price, who is a sixth-year guard now. He was eligible for one more year of college basketball at the Division I level because of the what the House did with eligibility with JUCO products.
Right.
So he had one more year of eligibility with Division I. Now, those are the 5 guys that he's taken with him. All 5 have since made that commitment to Denver, and transfer portal closes in 6 days from today. So MSUM's going to get on getting that finalization of their head coach hired because they got a half a roster to fill.
Right. Right. So that I won't say it leaves the cupboard bare, but also I was thinking about it. It does leave an opportunity for the incoming coach at MSU, because what it does is he can go out and he can recruit and say, hey, look, well, I've got to build a team. You know, he can go look at some of these better players locally or nationally and say, hey, look, if you want to start right now, if you want to have a chance to keep the ball rolling, so to speak, come do it in Morehead State. So I'm pulling for him, you know, being a former Dragon. Well, once a Dragon, always a Dragon. But, you know, that's what's happening in sports now. We see a lot of movement with NIL and the transfer portal, and this is the way sports are going to be moving forward. You know, I was talking to Snuffy Byers, who a Bison great, and we were talking about the fact that, you know, the smaller schools, if you're not a major university, you're basically a feeder program for those poets exploded. And so one of the great things is the Bison have managed, especially in the past few years, they've had key players leave, but yet they've managed to maintain their excellence in football. I'm hoping the same thing happens with MSU. But either way, thank you for everything, Coach Tim. I'm hoping to get him on my show because I would love for people to hear the perspective of somebody. You know, we talk about loyalty and honoring your contract, but, you know, everybody, if they have a chance to move up, is going to take it. You know, if they said, hey, we want you to take over for Jay Thomas, I'll be like, well, see you next week, Jay. Right? It's an opportunity. And, you know, Jay will be off syndicated. He'll go to Washington or someplace, be a big fish out there too. But, you know, right? The sky is not falling. You know, we have to learn as sports fans. I mean, we're going to miss him and stuff like that because, let's face it, it was fun to watch MSU this year. And the past 3 years and the way they have ascended to national prominence and to get to the Sweet 16, all of that, it's just fun. All out of a small town, a small university in northern Minnesota. So regardless of how you feel one way or the other, I think we do have to wish people well. But do you know, have they said where they're going to start the search? Did he take any coaches with him?
That is, it's a great question. I've been doing my digging, and as of right now, there's no word on Spencer Bland, his associate head coach. I know he is currently weighing his options. I don't know if that means that he's weighing his option on possibly moving to Denver with Coach Bergstrasser, or if he's weighing the option of becoming possibly the next head coach of the program. All I can do is myself as the broadcaster and a guy that spends a lot of time around that team is Spencer Bland is a guy that I'm hoping wants to go at this point, Mr. Bland.
Well, I think it also comes down to dollars, you know, and I think that a place like the University of Denver probably is able to offer him, even as an assistant coach, a little more. But, you know, one of the things is, you know, Coach Tim, he's worked hard at building his brand, so to speak. And I know, having been a head coach, that you're only as good as your staff and your players, you know? So I would think it wouldn't be shocking if the guy left, but either way, you know, I like what's happening in Morehead State, and I'm actually going to have President Downs on I've had him on before, but I'm going to have him on again because I think that